Welcome to Undiet Your Coaching Practice podcast. I'm Stephanie Dozier, clinical nutritionist, certified intuitive eating counselor, and creator of the Going to Beyond the Food method. And after a 25-year dieting career, I decided to say hell no to diet culture and undiet my life, which also included my coaching practice. I'm on a mission to help all coaches undiet not only their life, but their coaching business. If you want to throw down diet culture, you're in the right place. Ready, sisters? Let's do this. Welcome to the podcast, Victoria and Brianna.
Hello. Thanks for having us, Stephanie.
I think this is going to be the beginning of a relationship of a threesome.
I'm so here for that.
Yeah. We were just chatting at the beginning on how we follow each other's work, but actually never talk to each other. So I think we're breaking the ice right now.
I don't know about you two, but I never want to be seen with you, either of you, ever again. I'm not interested in this friendship.
Especially this topic, eh?
Yeah.
So I brought the three of us together because I want to talk about a subject that I have been sitting on for months, and I've not been publicly coming out yet. And I want this to be my coming out. And I wanted other people's point of view. And that topic is what I believe to be the need of body size diversity in our industry. And I think I found some ally into that desire. Am I correct?
Yep.
Absolutely.
So we're going to talk about why we believe that and how we can help this diversity to increase. But let's talk about us starting on the conversation. How's been your experience operating, we'll call it a non-diet coaching business as a fat person?
Go on, Brianna.
Okay. We're like giving each other the eyes. You go. So, a great question. I believe that the need for diversity in body size, in coaching, dietetics, all of the fields is so essential because I think representation matters. And I know that when I was sharing with all of you before, we started recording, that when I started learning about health at every size, I was looking for people who looked like me and found very few people who I was like, oh yeah, you look like me. I resonate with you. I've been following Victoria's work for years. So, I knew Victoria existed. I knew Jess Baker existed. And so, thinking about coaches or clinicians, I think it was a lot harder. I think there's more now, but I think being able to see yourself in someone else who, has walked in similar experience as you is so essential.
Can you repeat the question, Stephanie?
How has been your experience operating a non-diet coaching business as a fat person?
So now I know why you made me go first, because you didn't hear the question.
Sorry, what was the question?
What was the question? I should have just asked.
My experience operating in a non-diet business as a fat person, I tell you what, it's hard. As a fat person, we experience, as you both know, that there's a barrier there for us to do the work that we do. And that barrier is fatphobia, and trying to do our job and having to deal with trolls and all sorts of other types of people that think what we're doing is the most offensive and disgusting thing ever, means that there's an added layer of difficulty that we have to go through to be visible, one, and two, keep being visible and being successful. It has been the biggest mindfuck that I've ever had to deal with. And I've spent so many hours in therapy talking about my business and being a fat person and the trauma that comes with that. And I think it's so painful and sad that we can't just do our job. We can't do our job. We are abused for doing our job. So, and it's not okay. And it sucks, but it's amazing that we get to do it.
Yeah, it's a passion work, I think, eh?
It is, yeah. Yeah, you're right.
So it's not my podcast, but can I ask you both a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
How have you dealt with the trolls? Like, I know people have said to me, I don't know how you do this work. Like, I don't know how you show up despite people telling you, the most horrible things. So how do you deal with it?
So for me, it kind of came to a breaking point where a couple of years ago, I was on a BBC two-part documentary called Who Are You Calling Fat? And the UK is very fat phobic, more so than Canada, maybe in different ways. But the fallout from that, millions of people watched. About 3 million people watched the documentaries. It's been streaming for now a couple of years. So let's say 5 million people have watched it. And most of those people watching it are not fat positive. And so I got bombarded with hate. Obviously, I knew that was going to happen. I have spent years in therapy and will always be in therapy because therapy is cool and great and amazing. And I thought that I was pretty robust and I knew what to expect. Trigger warning, I'm going to be talking about suicide in a moment. The response to that was so difficult for me to deal with that I began thinking of suicide. So at that point, I knew, okay, I need to protect my mental health because this is not okay that my job comes with the risk of death for me. That's not okay. And so I've slowly started, putting boundaries in place. Now I've got to the point where my VA actually reads all of my Instagram messages and responds to them and my emails. And I'm super careful about how I engage on social media. Because, the risk reward is just out of whack, where there's a risk of me dying from reading my DMs. It's not cool for me. So to answer that question, Brianna, very hard. But now I feel like I'm in a better place where I'm able to cope with the little bits that I do see.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that people suck and that, it drove you to that place. I would definitely agree that some people suck. But I think the other thing about this community is that people will protect you. Like, I have seen people come for trolls in my comment. Like, why are you here? I'm like, you can take care of it. It's fine.
Right. Yeah.
For me, it's very similar to you, Victoria. I started my career in the field being a thin-bodied person. I met intuitive eating 7 years ago, health at every size, through my own journey, and went back to a fat body. So I transitioned in the public eye. So that led me to a lot of therapy, a lot of mindset, thought work. The journey of being a fat-bodied professional person in public eyes has led me to a lot of personal development and investment in my mental health that I probably would have not had or as much if I was in a thinner body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's block and delete. I'm like you. I've got hardcore boundaries because of protection of my mental health. Like, block and delete is my favorite function.
My favorite thing to do is if somebody goes in and likes that person's comment, block and delete you too.
Yes, too.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get contacting me. Bye-bye.
Yeah. One thing I want to recognize is that, I mentioned, and Stephanie did it as well, about going to therapy. And I'm so lucky and privileged to be able to afford to go to therapy. And I think about, the other intersections of having a marginalized identity that I don't have. What if a person of color or a disabled person or any other marginalized identity who's also fat, also trying to do this work, what if they were experiencing, and they will be experiencing, the same things we are? They have the odds stacked up against them even more than I did. And so kind of just recognizing that I am so lucky and privileged to be able to be here and be alive and doing this work. It might not be the same story if I had even more things to make it difficult for me.
I agree with that so much. And I always joke that, like, my experience in my graduate work was the mental health care I could never afford.
Yeah.
And that not everyone is going to have that privilege. And so I know for me, dealing with the trolls, was a non-issue because I already had to work through my fear of not being liked. And that was such a deep wound that resonated in my life way before I joined Instagram and, shared my life publicly in a social setting. And I think when you can have the privilege of doing the work around those core beliefs and caring less and less what people think about me, especially people I love and care about, you care a lot less what people you don't know think about you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Absolutely. So let's move on to the next layer of this discussion. Why is it important, in your perspective, that we have more body size diversity in globally the non-diet approach specifically? Not that we're discounting other marginalized identity, we're just focusing the conversation on body size diversity. Why do you think it's important or it matters?
Well, it's crucial to represent the reality of the world, which is that we have a wide variety of different body sizes, and to make those different body sizes visible makes the people who are being represented feel seen. It's deeply healing to see someone who looks like you, and just seeing someone who looks like you being represented anywhere, it's a little bit of joy. It's a little bit of happiness. It's a little bit of, okay, the people who are sharing these types of images think that it's okay that I look like I do, and people who are bigger than me and of diversity in their appearance. So it brings joy, and it is absolutely necessary to eradicate hate towards those different body sizes.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also think there is a kinship and a safety in working with somebody who shares identity with you. And I've had people tell me, like, I'm working with you because you're fat or because you're living the life that I want to live. I'm like, no pressure. but trying to learn that from someone who hasn't experienced some of the same hurdles or difficulties because they have privilege that you don't have, I think it makes it hard. It makes it difficult to relate.
Yeah. I hear a lot of clients say to me, you get it. Like, they don't need to explain. They'll be like, going to the doctors, you get it. And it's like, it just cuts out so much that they have to explain, oh, did you know going to the doctor, they tell you to lose weight and blah, blah, blah. And of course, straight size people get it because they've heard the stories. Well, not all of them get it, but to know deep in your bones that feeling of being told to lose weight at the doctors, or not fitting into a chair, or not being able to find clothes to fit, or not being able to get a date because people think that you're too unattractive or whatever, we get it. And of course, I'm a medium fat person. And so I get it up until that point. And I lose the getting itness for bigger fat people. But I think exactly what you said, Brianna, that safety that we could bring.
And I don't think the coaching or the therapy or the medium of coaching you're using, I don't think lands in the person in the same way when it comes from someone who shares identity with them than somebody who perhaps in a smaller body. It doesn't land the same way with them.
Yeah, that's so true. It's almost like we could be saying the same things.
Yes.
But if it comes from someone who doesn't share that identity, then I can't buy in. I can't buy in.
In the back of their minds, like, does she really get it? Is that really possible?
The analogy that's coming in my head is almost like, if you're traveling, it's people who've been there or people who've like read about it and seen other people talk about it. Like, we've been there. We have we have stock there. Like, we know exactly what it's like.
Yeah,
and it's inspiring also. That's also something I hear a lot. It's inspiring for people in larger body to do their work because they see it as possible through our own life.
I think it's because, like, I don't know if either of you can resonate with this, but I think because I'm living my authentically healed life, sometimes I forget where I came from of like, oh, it used to be hard for me to walk into a room because I was afraid what people would think about me. And so remembering those pain points of this is where our clients are. And I can have that memory of, oh yeah, I remember what it was like to be there. Whereas, people who don't have that experience, they can hear about it, but they can't share in that experience.
Mm-hmm. Let me know what you think of that through our own life, in our own operation of our business and working with people, we are helping dismantling weight stigma.
Yeah, like a bajillion percent. A bajillion, it's
a
science.
bajillion.
Science is spoken. Yeah.
But I have to remind myself that sometimes.
Really? Why?
Because when it gets tough and you're trying to anchor into why you're doing this work, right? Like, I mean, we're doing this work to earn our basic living and pay rent and put food on the table. What is the bigger reason why I do this work? I have to re-anchor myself in my bigger passion work than just working 40 hours a week and making a basic amount of money. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's so anchored in me the moment when I was reading Reagan Chastain's blog and I heard the message, it's okay to be fat. You can be fat and health is not a barometer of worth. I remember that moment. It's seared in my brain, lying in bed with my then partner, turning to him and saying, oh my God, did you know this? Like this secret? And I just think about that all the time in regards to this work when I'm, inundated with trolls or whatever, that I'm doing that for other people and that they are hearing that message for the very first time from me. And maybe in the future, they're going to be like, I remember the first time I heard the message and now I'm telling the world. And I just think of that ripple effect of all of those people who are just getting that one message and it changing their life, because it changed my life when I heard that from Reagan. And Reagan obviously heard it from someone else, and and it goes back to the OG fat activist, that we are changing the world with what we're doing, just simply by being fat and just being alive and just doing it.
Yeah. I don't know how you both feel about this, but I feel called to acknowledge that I don't think that this means that small-bodied or privileged people shouldn't do this work. I think there are people who definitely feel this way. And the reason I say that is because my fat phobia, my internalized fat phobia, was so great. I needed to hear it from a Christy Harrison. I needed to hear it from a Fiona Sutherland, because I was like, they have no skin in the game. They gain nothing by telling me it's okay to be fat. I'm like, are you sure?
Yes, 1 billion percent. The very first book I read, which is all of the very first book that most people read, which is Health at Every Size by Dr. Lindo Bacon.
Yes.
Lindo is a straight-sized person, and I would not have picked up that book and read it and just devoured it and believed it if Lindo was fat. I couldn't. I would have just been like, wow, they're saying that because they're greedy and lazy and they're trying to
justify their body. And
yeah, exactly. So I always talk about how it's so important that we have straight size allies, because a lot of times they need to be the gateway, and how, fucked up that is, that unfortunately a lot of people are so fat phobic, like I used to be, that I could not hear it from a fat person. And so we need them to be kind of the gateway into the more radical side of fat liberation and fat acceptance.
Absolutely. So it's funny because I'll bring this point up right now. I was doing some research prior to this podcast, and I was looking at the almost in existence research on body size diversity in healthcare. And I found one paper, and it was body size diversity in the title. And when I looked at the diversity element they studied, it was about race, ethnicity, gender, age. They never studied body size diversity in healthcare. They studied every other diversity, and body size was completely out. This is how deep weight stigma and fat phobia is, people. It wasn't even me research.
Like, why is that not shocking? Me and
Brianna just like, yep. That sounds
it's shocking,
right.
But it's to show how important the work is that we do.
Yeah. I used to, pre-COVID, I used to teach at a small college nearby, and I taught introduction to eating disorders. And I remember we would talk a lot about implicit bias and how, especially in the medical field, that there's like evidence that, like, a doctor, I think it was like, I wish I had the research accessible to me. I'll look for it. But it was like 3 seconds. They will already have, an assumption in their mind about you and what healthcare you need. And there are different marginalizations that there's a longer period of time that they will withhold that assumption, but with larger bodied folks, 3 seconds.
Wow. That's, yeah. Ugh. And I was just looking like a couple of days ago, this whole website that was dedicated to unlearning weight bias. And I was like, oh, fuck yeah, let's have a look at this. The amount of weight bias on that website, because it was written by straight size folks. And they were like, okay, we want to help eradicate weight bias, because if fat people experience weight bias, then they won't be able to get thin. And we want to really help them to stop being so greedy and eating shit. And we want to support them in exercising. I was like, what the fuck am I reading? And then they had like different weight bias scales and tests and things like that. And I was like, hello. You're perpetuating weight bias in your weight bias training. Dear Lord. It was just, right. Oh, yeah, it was so funny.
Weight bias to me is I don't want to say the only, but the rare discrimination that's still politically correct.
I would say yes and no, because I think in some ways it's politically correct to be a weight bigot. But it is still okay in a lot of circles to be transphobic, to be racist, to be all of these things. And what happens to trans people when they experience that transphobia is they're murdered. What happens to Black people? They're murdered. Fat people, we die absolutely due to poor healthcare and all that type of stuff. But I think I see exactly what you're saying with that, Stephanie, that in liberal circles, in liberal spaces, and I did a video on this, in liberal spaces, there is an absolute dearth of understanding that fat is a political issue. And because of all the wellness and all that type of shit, they will happily be like, let's get behind all of these other marginalized identities, but fat people are gross and they need to lose weight. And so I think there's a distinction there. I think in general society, all types of bias are still absolutely politically correct and devastating to the people experiencing them.
That was such a concise and beautiful answer.
Thank you.
I will actually own that I used to say that. I used to be like, it's the last form of acceptable discrimination. And somebody explained it much like Victoria did. And I was like, oh, you're right. And so I really like that differentiation of in places where we typically advocate for human rights.
Yes.
There's still a social acceptability of shaming fat people under the guise of health.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, we just want them to be healthy. Well, guess what, friends? Shame is not healthy.
So I have another good question for you. So I made a statement a couple of weeks ago where I said, I'm not even interested in losing weight. And that statement went out to the world and it shocked people. People thought that my body acceptance was still under the term that if there was a way for me to lose weight, I would lose weight. I have no interest in losing weight. Like, this is the place where my body acceptance is landing today. And I'm wondering, how would you answer that question?
In my TEDx talk, one of my lines is, I have a secret to tell you. Get ready to recoil in horror because it is really outrageous. And the secret is, I don't want to lose weight. And it's kind of, I'm making a joke that people are going to recoil in horror, but really people are recoiling in horror of, why the fuck would you not want to lose weight? Personally, I'm not interested in losing weight. If I happen to lose weight just because that's what my body does, or put on weight, whatever, I would be sad if I became a straight size person, because I feel such joy and community and lovely, juicy goodness from being fat. And it's just so, I view it as, it's just such a wonderful thing about me. And also recognizing life is harder if you're fat. Like, it would be easier if I was a straight size person. I would now be able to go walk into the hundreds of Vancouver stores and buy stuff. Whereas right now, there's one store that I can shop at. I would be able to find loads of people to date. And right now people are like, they're fat. And I'm like, hello, have you seen how fucking cool I am? Like, what is wrong with you with the way that you view me? I'm amazing. So life would be easier, but I like being fat. Yeah. So I'm with you there with Stephanie.
I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but I'll have clients who are like, okay, but like seriously, like there's no side effects. There's nothing wrong. Like you really wouldn't choose to exist in a smaller body. And I mean, and maybe I differ in this of sure, like if there was no side effects, like fine. But not because it would make me a better person, not because it would make me a more confident person, not because I would love myself more, legitimately would just make my life easier. That I could go to the theater and not worry about like, ooh, are these seats going to fit me? That I could go and fly on an airplane and not worry about, do I need to get a second seat because I'm not sure if this is going to fit me? That I could be able to walk into any store and be like, oh, yep, all of the clothes here, I'll find something that fits. So if I'm really coming up with a miracle, like wave a wand, I'm not going to do it to change my body. I'm going to do it to change the system because, and this is part of what, and I talk about with clients is that this body grief of, okay, well, what happens if I exist in a smaller body, but then for whatever reason, I lose my mobility to something else. It's then not about my body size, but about my ableism, my ability to do. And so I think if I truly had a magic wand and I really had that power, I wouldn't waste that on my body. I would invest that on more adequate resources and accessible resources for people.
Imagine if you could like have a day where you can like wave a wand and you happen to be in a straight size body and you can go around and experience the world as if you would if you were straight size. Because I've never been straight size. I can't even imagine what that would be like. That would be like really interesting to see.
I feel like I would never, like, it would hurt me to go back to a larger body because I think that's one of the things that I hear clients talk about is they don't have the ability to pass as smaller bodied anymore. Like when we're dieting, we can pass in a smaller body, but when you give up, you miss out on those privileges.
Yeah, the privileges. Interesting to think about. I'm like thinking about like, what would it be like to be thin? And it kind of makes me sad because I would recognize how much people treat me differently.
Oh my, I think that would be the worst. Like, that's the thing I feel like would hurt me the most is the more love or the more quote unquote attention I would receive. As though like we did something miraculous, right? Like,
yeah.
Cancer. No, you got thin. Amazing.
Yeah. Something that really highlights it for me is, so I'm on the dating apps. I'm trying to find me a romantic partner. And twice, two different straight size friends have been on the dating apps and being like, I'm going to send messages for you. And I'm like, yes, please, go ahead, send them messages. And they will spend like half an hour sending like cute messages and stuff. And then afterwards, both times, they're like, okay, so what happened? Tell me about all of those people up in your DMs responding to my messages. And I have to break it to them. I didn't get one single response. And they're like, what? They don't understand because if they did it in their body, a straight size body, they would be inundated with responses. But I'm not. And the only thing that I can see that the difference is my body size because I'm fucking rad. And and they're sending cute messages, and so it's really surprising for straight size people that why don't people want to date you? I don't know. The answer, I don't know. Why don't people want to date me?
Honestly, I used to grieve me also. And now I'm like, like a really great filter. Like,
yeah.
I get to filter through all the people I wouldn't want to waste my time with anyway.
Oh my God. You know what? I say that to people all the time because what if you were straight sized and then you happen to start dating someone and then you put on weight and only then you realize that they are a body bigot and they don't want to date a fatty, then you're going to have to break up with them and all that type of shit. But we've got that filter just by our body.
Yeah!
Lucky us.
I can tell you that's my body is somehow my filter on social media because this is who I am. So if you don't want to deal with a fat person, like people don't even follow. And when I transition from the thin to the fat body, I lost a whole bunch of people and then I regained people. Why do you look surprised, Victoria?
Well, because who's unfollowing you because you're fat? Like, I'm not surprised, but I'm
Come
still
on.
surprised. I'm just surprised by people being so shit.
So I dieted for 25 years. So I've been thin, fat, and I just landed on the now body for the last 8 years of fat. So I had a following before, and these people were following me because I was a quote a health expert in a thin body.
And so they were like, oh, she's fucked up now.
Exactly. Like she's gaining weight, so unfollow. But you know what? It's been the filter to my people.
Yes.
Like they truly are my people and they like me for me, not because of my size or my beauty or whatever.
Yeah.
I also try, it's really hard. I really try not to read into like why people follow or unfollow. I mean, back before I was much more boundaried than I am. I would dialogue with people and it would be like, oh, they're following you. And it's like, oh, they're not following you. They're following you. They're not following you. And so sometimes I'm just like, they're on a journey. So maybe my page is triggering or activating to them that they needed to unfollow for a little bit. And it sucks. And also it doesn't say anything about me. It says everything about them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's move the discussion to solution, or what the conversation was all about. How can we, or should we, I think we answered we should have more fat-bodied people in the profession. How do we get there? What do we need to do? Not we, us, the industry, like what needs to happen to have diversity in our profession?
It's a great question.
I know.
The people who have the power, straight size people in this instance, in regards to body size, they are the ones who have to do a lot of this work. It can't come from the people who have that marginalized identity. And so it comes down to a lot of times straight size people passing the mic and saying, here's a big thing that I think that we need to say is, all the time, straight size people who are in the anti-diet world learn a lot from fat people and Black people and trans people and people with marginalized identities. They learn a lot from those people, but they never credit them. They never say, hey, I learned about this concept from XYZ person. They just talk about how they've discovered it or whatever. And they don't say I've discovered it, but it's just a part of their knowledge. They don't share anything to do with diverse bodies. A lot of times, I tell you what, it gets on my floppy swinging tits is a lot of these big accounts. They share images of fat bodies that are quote unquote palatable. So it's the curvy fat person. It's the one who's got, a flat stomach. It's the one with the big tits and the big bums, or it's the ones showing images of a straight sized person with the teeniest, tiniest little tummy roll, which is not a tummy roll. It's just a little bit of skin and being like, oh my God, my life has been so hard because I've got this roll. And they don't want to, or they're not able to, for whatever reason, share the work of super fat people, infini fat people who are not fat in the quote unquote right way, because it's not good for their brand, because they're fat phobic. And so straight size providers need to unlearn their fat phobia and pass the mic to fat people and credit fat people and pay fat people.
Yes.
So for example, nutritionists and dietitians will have me come into their programs and teach about fat phobia. They shouldn't be teaching about fat phobia. I had this message. Oh, this is going to get me riled up. I had this message. I got this message. And this was the straw that broke the camel's back, where I passed my messages on to my VA to read because I couldn't anymore, from a straight size person who was teaching people how to unlearn fat phobia. And they wanted me to share to my audience their course so that my audience of fat people could learn from them, a straight size person, how to unlearn fat phobia. And they weren't like, hey, I'd love to compensate you for this, or hey, I've just anything. They were just like, can you share my shit because I want to make money, basically. They didn't follow me. They didn't know anything about me. And I said, oh, actually, no, I can't. And actually, this is not the best way to go about this. If you'd like to learn more, then, let me know. And they were just like, fuck you. How dare you? They went off.
You should see my face right now. It's priceless. It really happened?
They were like, you're saying I'm a bad person. I'm like, no, all I'm doing is trying to do this, and I'm a good person. And I was very kind and respectful. Like, I'm not a mean person, right? And I just said, stop messaging me. And they messaged me message after message after message after message going off. And I'm like, listen, holy shit, how can you come to a fat content creator, fat activist, and say, get your fat people to learn about fat phobia from me? Hell fucking no, I'm not. My people are going to learn about fat stuff from fat people. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Anyway, that was, I'm like getting riled up just thinking about it. Like rude.
Sometimes it feels like, and I don't know if either of you have this experience, but it doesn't come from a genuine place of like, I want my clients to know this, but of I should have this module in. I should have this. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there are times where I have felt like a token fat person for people of like, you've never, come to anything that I've taught. I have, low accessible price points. And it's like, oh, but can you come in and do, a chat for my audience? And it's like, but if you've never invested in my work, like, are you going to pay me? Are you going to?
I was going to say, is it paid?
Yeah. There have been times where it's not been like explicit. So I'm to the point where I'm not allowed to take anything anymore without going over with my team. Cause I'm also like yes, I'll do everything. And then I'm like, oh, why am I burnt out? I'm so tired.
Yeah. Cause I think like we're genuinely passionate. Like we want to get this message across. And so sometimes we can be like, oh yeah, I'll do it for free. But I'm the same, like absolutely no way am I doing it for free when I'm educating you people. And I can tell so clearly because of the way that some people's audiences, they are so not versed in anything to do with fat politics at all, even like basic stuff. And so you think, is this all the fat education they're getting? Because there's a big gap between where they are and where they should be in regards to understanding basic concepts. And so that for me is a bit of a red flag of, I think you need to be doing a little bit more to help your clients understand diet culture and fat phobia.
So more individual education at the professional level, the coach level first, investing. And I know, Brianna, you do provider training. I don't know, it's group-based. Am I correct?
It is now group course based. So you can also do it on your own.
And do you have any part of your business with that, Victoria, or you're just client focused?
Yeah, so I teach about weight bias. So in companies,
So the first place to start is to learn from a fat person personally. That would be the first step for us to increase body diversity, and then passing the mic and hiring fat folks to deliver anti-fat phobic teaching to clients.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did I get this right?
Yeah. And I think just making it normal to be talking about how everything is related, how diet culture is related to fat phobia, which is related to racism, which is related to colonialism, which is, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a fact, because I think a lot of people don't mention that, and they twist themselves in knots to try and not mention fat phobia or weight bias because they want to keep it light and fluffy. I tell you what, holy shit. I was listening to this podcast, right? Okay. It's really good. It's called One Click from Elle Fanning. Elle Fanning is a thin white Hollywood actress. And the podcast is about the diet drug. I can't remember the name of the diet drug, but anyway, this is a famous diet drug which burns people alive, basically. I mean, like heats their body up so that they die. They had an episode on the history of dieting. They even had Sabrina Strings, who is a Black woman who wrote about fat phobia and racism. Most of every other expert they had were thin white people. And they did everything in that hour-long episode to not once mention fat phobia. Not once. I'm like, how the fuck did they manage that? Even when they had Sabrina on, and they must have cut out everything that she said because they never once mentioned fat phobia. And I'm like, how can you not mention it inside this discussion about why are we so anxious about being thin that we take diet pills and we die? Well, it's fucking fat phobia, like hello, but they talk about everything else but. And I think a lot of straight size people do that, is that they talk about everything else but the good stuff.
Yeah. And like, it's from being afraid to have the conversation, afraid of getting it wrong, or just like, we're not talking about that.
Yeah.
I think it's the whole, we can go into business conversation about this, is the non-political messaging of your brand. We don't have a choice but to have a political message in our marketing and our branding, because that's our story, right?
Yeah.
But
maybe that's what it is, that they don't
well, anybody's heard of Kelly Dills here?
Yeah.
Well, so Kelly Dills is a feminist marketing consultant specialist. I'm not sure the last portion of her title, but she's a feminist marketing expert. And she talks about the female lifestyle empowerment brand.
Yeah.
Which many women fall into the trap of building their business on fluffy message that you call, Victoria, right? Woo-woo, fluffy message. But as feminists or as people living in fat body, if we want our message to go through, it has to be anchored in political message, because that's the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is not enough woo or energies or vibes. It's fucking political, the problem.
Yeah.
So our brand is constructed around that. But people, it doesn't, quote, sell as well. When you look at business statistic, political message doesn't sell as much as woo-woo, fluffy,
feel good. Yeah.
pretty branded message.
Yeah. This is such a great point, Stephanie. And we can't not be political. It's just a part of, but the thing is, anyone talking about anything to do with this message, it is political, and they would have to try really hard to make it not political, because I think some people are afraid about people not liking their message,
alienating audiences.
Yes.
And who they're alienating are people who they shouldn't be wanting to attract. Like, I had someone on my Facebook and I said something like some anti-Trump thing, and they were like, hang on a minute, I thought that you said that all women should be empowered. I don't say that. I'm not a woman myself. I don't identify as a woman, and I don't say empowered or whatever. And I was like, no, like, fat positivity is a political movement, and Trump, a conservative white man, is the opposite of what I'm going for. And so she's like, well, you don't like Trump supporters. And I'm like, listen, Trump supporters are not in line with, you can't be a right-wing conservative and also say I'm fat positive, and really for it to be true, because to be fat positive, you also have to be not a massive knob, basically, and to be politically, forward thinking. And so it doesn't match. And so she was like, how dare you? And got her sister on my page saying, you should accept Trump supporters. And I was like, I don't, because our politics don't align. And the same with me talking about vaccinations. I had a lot of people get mad about that, because they were like, I thought you were, pro people making their own choice. And I was like, yeah, but, to an extent. And so I understand why people might be afraid of saying things which are, quote unquote, controversial. They're not controversial to say that fat people are people, but you have to do it. You can't tie yourself in knots to avoid it.
I think a really important distinction here is, you don't necessarily have to go on and be like, here's who I voted for, here's who I'm supporting. But I know for me, I make it very clear that I support trans rights. I support, LGBTQ. I support Black Lives Matter. And I am not afraid if you unfollow me because of those things that I have highlighted as important to me. And so I think there has to be a comfort in being quote unquote canceled by certain people by standing up, because if you're going to say that you care about fat rights, then you have to care about other marginalizations as well.
Yeah.
But I think that's what makes some of our colleagues uncomfortable talking about fat phobias, because their platform isn't built on that kind of narrative. It builds more on fluffy, easy message.
But that's convenient.
Because it's convenience in that cell. It's pretty, right?
Not advocate for, it's like if it's not personal to you, right? So like, I think that there's privilege in that. So being able to recognize that.
And I want to say we've talked obviously a lot about body diversity and body image and that kind of stuff, but the intuitive eating movement. So if you're an intuitive eating coach, diet culture is a political conversation altogether, right? Food is a political conversation. So moving our platform to talk about that part of the problem is essential, because otherwise we keep people thinking they're the problem, not diet culture, patriarchy, and all the system of oppression.
Do you think they're, because I'm very kind of selective with who I follow, are there intuitive eating coaches who don't connect that stuff to diet culture? Like,
they connect it, but they don't talk about it as, in my experience from interacting with many, they don't necessarily connect it yet and communicate it as a political message.
Yeah. And I guess then you got the charlatans who are like intuitive eating for weight loss, and
Exactly.
Again,
And I am nothing if I'm not understanding of where people are in their journey, but I encourage you, if you are fearful of being quote unquote political, what are you protecting? What is the fear that's coming up? If the fear is that you're going to say something wrong, then that's an indication maybe you need some education. Maybe you need to go and get some supervision around that topic. If you're afraid that you're going to alienate people and people aren't going to buy your product, that's also good information. But are we going to let that fear dictate what you represent openly?
Ooh, that's good.
Yeah. And there are lots of fat people, us three here, who are delighted to educate on fat phobia. And we understand, like Brianna and I both mentioned that how we used to be raging fat phobes and like had like fucking, and I presume Stephanie, you're the same. Like we weren't born thinking fat is cool. We were born thinking that fat is disgusting, right? And so we too were at a place where we didn't get this stuff, and we all have so much learning to do. And so it's not a bad thing to say, oh, actually, I think there might be a little bit an opportunity here for me to learn more about this, and to reach out to someone like us and say, hey, can you teach me more about this? And here's some money for you for your efforts there. Because there's going to be a lot of fat people who that's not their job to educate, right? But we are three fat people. It's our job to educate, and we're delighted to do that.
Yeah. And I would say we're not scary, right? Like,
No.
we're not going to be like, you're a bad person because you said, or, right? We want to help you, but don't tokenize us and don't ask us to do free work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
But I think the conversation, the free work, broader than just fat people. We need to develop a culture in our industry to pay people for their work.
Oh my God.
No matter what it is, no matter what they're educating on, this whole free work situation is not cool in my eyes.
Yeah, like fucking exposure shit. The exposure. Oh my God. If I could. Oh, really? You're going to expose me to your three people following? Like, I don't care. Like, what's that going to do? Like, no.
Oh, goody.
Like, oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, like anyone, like I used to say that too. When I was first in business, I'd be like, hey, come and do this for me and you'll get exposure. And I thought that was pretty cool. And now I'm like, oh God, Victoria, what the fuck were you thinking? Like, no,
but that's the bro industry. Like this is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, like
episode 2.0. But
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I had to really look at my relationship to money and worth and value of, yeah, I would do this for free, but I'm also worth being paid. And that's, I'm all talk. Like if then someone's like, I want to pay, I'd be like, blah, 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 blah.
But that's my level. I don't know where you are with your own level of dismantling, but I'm in the process of dismantling my relationship to money.
Yeah.
Because, and this is a clinical observation, there's no research behind this, but tell me what you have in your world. Body image, money issue, hand in hand. 100%. Almost in every people that I work with, they come in hand. And it's for me too. How about you?
Explain more. Tell me more what that looks like for you.
Scarcity. So the way I observe it with me and my population is the scarcity that people feel with their body never being enough, not good enough, is transferred into their relationship to money. Mm-hmm. Not worth the money, not worth asking for money. That whole not worth gets tangled up like a big ball with money.
Yeah. Well,
I know for me. Go ahead.
Well, it's both of directly tied to capitalism, right? So if we think about capitalism, we think about human bodies being a tool for capitalism, and a tool for another part of that is like how you can work, how physically able you are, and also reproduction. If you are sexually attractive, therefore you'll be able to reproduce. And so as a fat person, society tells us that we are not sexually attractive, and society tells us we are less valuable because of our body size. And so those two parts of the capitalistic thing, like we are not a good participant in capitalism. And then, so in our brains, we're not thinking of this consciously, but in the back of the brains, we are seeing ourselves as less than, we are not a good tool for capitalism. Therefore, we're not worthy of receiving the money or spending money on ourselves, because why? We are not a worthy human.
I'm so glad that you went first, because I tied much of my self-worth to my productivity and to my giving. And part of those are values for me. I'm an Enneagram 2. I love helping. I love to give. And I have some reframes that I'll read for you.
Yeah.
That I have written out that I had to remind myself is it is okay to be financially compensated for my time and energy. That was a hard message for me to drive home. And then the other one, my worthiness is not connected to my giving.
Mine is money is a tool to experience life, because I used to think that money was a tool for value, a signal to your place in the establishment. So money for me, the work that I'm doing is becoming a tool to experience life.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Love it. Yeah. I think the more money is in the hands of fat people, the better. The more money that's in the hand of marginalized identities. Because like studies show that when cis white men get money, they hoard it, when everyone else.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. That Rachel Rogers is a business coach, and she talks about how I think, typical, cis white men, I think they'll put like 30% back into their community, whereas other not right, it's like 90%.
Oh wow.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Oh god. Yeah. Oh,
This was a very good conversation.
Yeah, I could talk to you two for ages.
I know. We should do part 2 at some point.
Huh?
We should do part 2.
Yeah, this is really interesting.
I think we've achieved the goal of putting onto the world a conversation that we need more body size diversity. One of the things that we need is more body size diversity, and beginning to understand how we can get there. For me, I'll just add one more point. We need more body size diversity in education, in professor level, where people get their certification, their degree. The person needs to be teaching a part of the professoral group from a body diverse place.
Yeah.
That is another starting point that needs to change.
Yeah. Yeah, because imagine like learning about how to serve fat clients and it's just a straight sized person talking about it. How would they know how to talk about that?
Yeah, it changes the conversation when you have that diversity at that level.
The country versus like going to the country and then reading and learning about the country.
What's that phrase? I think it's in disability rights. Nothing about us without us. Yeah. So there you go.
Thank you very much for having been here. And we will link to all the places where people can get in touch with you at the professional level. I know, Brianna, I think you've given us the link to your programs, and the same thing with you, Victoria, so people can learn from you.
Yes, please.
Thank you for having us.
Learn from as well people who have other marginalized identities as well. Please.
Absolutely.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, girls, boys,
Thank you.
girls, folks. Are you ready to launch your non-diet coaching business, or perhaps transition your current business to the non-diet model? Awesome. We have a program that will help you just do that and reach your goal. The Non-Diet Mentorship Program is a 6-month journey of business and professional development exclusively designed for health entrepreneurs mastering their own journey with diet culture, food, and body image, while also learning to build, grow, and transition their business with ethic so that they can have a massive impact. Our next cohort will begin January 3rd, 2022, and we will accept applications from November 15th, 2021. You can join our waitlist to be the first notified. Find the details at stephaniedozia.com/mentorship or use the link in the show notes. Maybe I'll see you on the other side. Ready to shed diet culture from your practice and help more clients do the same? Awesome. We've got free resources to get you started. Simply go to stephaniedodier.com/pro series, all in one word, and access our 3 free training classes that are currently available. We also have a free PDF guide to intuitive eating, an article about the non-diet approach. We also offer a variety of paid programs throughout the year to support you in your journey to undiet your coaching practice. Join us at stephaniedodier.com/pro series, and I'll see you on the other side.